today. So I think it was you, Jenny, suggested this topic from memory around time management. No, or Jenna?
No, it wasn't me.
Oh, someone did.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a good one. Talking about the topic that was proposed was time management, staying focused. I'll get the exact wording actually. Staying organised and keeping motivated. So the focus I've picked on is really that time management piece, because the other two sort of flow. If you get that bit right, the other two flow out, and we can definitely have separate sessions on staying motivated. I've got some slides that I'll step you through, but really maybe just to get a feel for everyone and make sure the content's right, because I'm more than happy to deviate from it. Just get an understanding of how would you all rate your own time management? Do you all feel like you're pretty well organised, getting shit done?
Do you want numbers or words?
I want all the expletive version. Maybe you go first, Jenny.
Time management, it depends on how much time I have to do something.
Right.
So if I have a tight deadline or a limited time, I'm very good at being organised and chunking things down and getting it done.
Yep.
If I've got a lot of time, I tend to fluff around way too much.
Yeah. And
I'm a deadline worker. I recognise that. So I try and give myself pretend deadlines when I know that I'm fluffing around.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's actually a really smart strategy too. Awesome. What about everyone else? How do we feel? Like, do we feel we've got good control over our workflow and work patterns and time usage?
I would say I have days, Mickey here, hi. I would say that I have really good days where time management is just on par. You know, you're just smashing through it. And then other days, everything just falls out the window. And it's hard to be consistent, I think, for me personally with my time management. So, yeah, I might go 2 or 3 days, which are brilliant, and then it might be, 3 or 4 or 5, 6 days, maybe, where it doesn't quite work. So, yeah, for me, it's trying to keep that time management consistency.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, definitely. Everyone else?
I think, I guess we're probably all going to have a similar story there. Again, can perform really well when there's clarity around expectations of myself or expectations from others. So as Jenny said, those deadlines, pretty important. But I think it's about having, the clarity around what you're expending your energy on. And I think for startups, it's sometimes difficult to prioritise what the main thing is at this moment to be focused upon. So I think that, fractured attention in terms of having 101 different things to be thinking about actually negatively impacts our productivity. That split, you're forever, fracturing that attention and therefore losing productivity.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. And we can definitely talk about multitasking too. You just made me think of that. Okay, so just before we kick off then, any specific problems or things that you want to get out of today? Is there anything specifically that you're looking for help on other than the things we've just talked about?
How do you put all your focus into one thing? I've got job, kids, trying to do real plans. And like you said, when first starting out, there's so many unknowns, so many things. I've got a book of things that I should be looking into and doing, and then I kind of go, it's too much, and just go and walk away. I need to learn to go, all right, I'm going to do this, and then once I've done that, I do this. I find it very hard to concentrate on one thing when I've got so many things that I'm thinking of. Yeah.
So there's definitely some techniques I'll share for that one as well. But you did just make me think of one more thing I'm just going to quickly add in to my speaking notes, which I'm going to put right up front. Anything else that anyone wants to go through?
Do you have a certain way that you organise your week and your day? Like, do you have a certain app that you use? Like, I've got a work calendar, a home calendar, a book.
Yes.
I'm finding it hard to get them all on the same platform.
Yeah, so definitely a lot of what I'll be sharing in this session are the techniques that I use to manage my time. I feel like I feel like I spend all my time managing my time, if that makes sense, but it definitely works. So.
And I do get caught up in that loop of managing my time. So I'm like, okay, here I'm planning. You get 2 minutes of action, and then you're back to planning.
Then what you got to do, you're like, there's so much. I don't know what I'm doing.
But it looks pretty on the page. So
I think too, Aaron, would be helpful, when you make up your plans for your time management, but part of that hinges on other people.
Yes.
And then how do you make that interact so that either you're not slowing people down or they're not slowing you down. And I find particularly when you're dealing with customers, they've all got their own schedules and, deadlines, and there's a lot of hurry up and wait, that happens.
Yes.
And I just find I'm constantly being dragged to everyone else's schedule, which then disrupts mine out the window, and then I end up kind of waiting for them anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I can totally relate to that. And that's something, if I don't touch on it directly in the section, that's definitely a conversation we could have as well. Like manage, because ultimately as founders, this isn't just about managing our own time. It's also about managing our team's time, our suppliers, partner, and everyone else, and making sure that they're staying on track. So it's a really good point, is that different perception of time and prioritization. Cool. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to share my slides. So I do have some slides. I want to apologize in advance that this is quite content heavy, what I've prepared, but what I want to say is it doesn't have to be. So really keen to make this interactive and a discussion. So just interrupt at any time. And look, if it's not delivering value, I'm absolutely more than happy to completely deviate from what I've prepared. So just interrupt at any point. Let's make this a conversation. Can everyone see the slides okay?
Yep.
Cool. So it is being recorded. I'll share it afterwards. Just to let you know where this stuff comes from. So basically, one of the luxuries of, I guess, my career path is I've gotten to work with thousands of entrepreneurs, but also gotten to see the insides of lots of amazing high-growth companies and how they manage teams and time and how they engineer performance. So these techniques are all taken from that. Almost everything in here is something I also practice or attempt to get right in my life. So speaking from that point as well. Now, one thing I'm always a fan of, even though I'm sort of contradicting myself in that I'm talking a lot in this one, I'm really about action, and I hate things that are purely theoretical. So what I'd encourage you all to do is to convert each point or each slide today into an actual action item. Like really make this something that you take away. So again, interrupt at any point. It's like, well, hang on, Aaron, you've said to do this, but how the F do you do that? Like, please interrupt and ask that question. Let's make sure we all have tangible takeaways from this and it's not just a theoretical waffle fest. So I've divided this up into 3 sections today, starting with our mindset. In other words, how we perceive and treat time. Then the second 2 sections are much more focused around techniques. So actually engineering and using timer effectively. But we're going to start with just the way we think about time, which might sound really obvious, but I think we miss a few points. And this comes from the base that, if you look at anyone who's successful in whatever they're successful at, doesn't really matter. They all have this same tendency to be able to decide to do something and just get it done. And the rest of us tend to have these ... moments. Like if you think of moments in your life where you have achieved something, you decided to do it and you did it. But then the things that we tend to procrastinate on or struggle with or not finish, we have all these incomplete things. There's this ... in between. And it's all about removing that ... And one thing I'd encourage you to do is stop using the word busy. So busy is totally bullshit. Whenever you say, I'm too busy to do something, I encourage you to change that to say, I'm choosing to prioritize something else right now. Because then it gives you ownership. Busy implies that it's happening to you. Like, oh, my boss is telling me to do this. Well, you could say no to your boss. Like ultimately you actually could. And for those of us, we're in business, we have clients, we can still think of it that way. So a personal example for me is, I remember being at work one day, like at a client site one day, and having to contact my ex and say, look, I'm supposed to get the kids this afternoon, but I'm stuck at work. Can you go do it? And then about 5 minutes later, someone else in the group said, hey guys, I've got to leave. I've got to go get my kids. And it's like, why the hell did I not prioritize my kids over work? Why did I choose to stay here? Because ultimately that's what it was. It was a choice for me to prioritize the client over my kids. And we all have that choice. So stop using the word busy and just say, I'm choosing to prioritize something else right now. The other thing is the way to look at time is and this again is stating the obvious, but we all have the same number of hours in a week. And so whatever we're currently doing, we're using all those hours, whether it's sleeping, whether it's lying on the couch, whatever it is, we're using every hour of our week in some way already. And what that means is that anytime we say yes to something, we have to first say no to something else. And so one very simple thing to do is to actually just have a chart, like a pie chart of your day or your week, and actually write down, like you can create, there's an Excel spreadsheet template I can share after this. But if you actually write down everything you do as part, like structured in your week, then whenever you say yes to something new, work out how many hours that is and what you're going to say no to. Because when you think of it that way, this is really what you are doing. And the goal is to constantly be improving the quality of what you're spending your time on. So if you do this and you actually apply it with this rigor, which sounds like it's over-engineered, but if you apply it with this rigor, what you end up with is constantly improving the quality of what you're spending time on and getting rid of the lower quality stuff. So, and eventually you'll get to the point where you end up saying no to things that are really awesome things because you've already got your cup's full. You've already got this amazing stuff in your day. And so, yeah, it does sound over-engineered, but it's a very interesting way to look at, I've already got a full cup. So what am I going to say no to when I say yes to this next thing? And we'll talk a lot about techniques for saying no, because ultimately time management is really actually about what you say no to, more than what you say yes to. So I will share that template afterwards. The other thing is obviously, and again, this is just all talking about mindset, but it goes to the point that you spoke about before is, so often when we're busy, we're not fully present in the moment. We're distracted. And yes, we're here with our kids, for example, but our brain is still back at work and back at the office. And the problem with that, not being fully present, is that it dilutes our sense of time. So you'd all know this, time seems to pass really fast sometimes because we're off in our head. We're not even in the present moment. But when you force yourself to be present, there's a lot of techniques you can use to be grounded in the moment. It actually slows down the passing of time. Like your perception of time changes. You're more aware of each minute. So it's not just how we use our time, it's are we fully present in the moment that's happening right in front of us? Because only then are we actually choosing to perform at our best. We're applying the full cognitive ability, our processing power of our brain, to whatever's right in front of us. So I'm more than happy to talk about techniques for being present and how to earth yourself in the moment. There's about a dozen strategies. More than happy to talk about that if you want to, but I think it's a key point. It's not just where we spend our time, it's how we're showing up in it.
I'd like to talk about that.
Sure. Anyone else want to talk about that one? Being present?
Yep.
Yeah. So there's a lot of techniques. So it's about transitioning your mode of action. And this can happen going from one meeting into another meeting. So say you've had to fire a staff member, you've had that yucky emotional reaction, and now you've got to go into the next moment with a customer and be all happy and chirpy. But it also happens just ending your day, going from work to home and having that inbox zero, like trying to get all the shit out of your head. So you can use transitioning techniques between those moments. One is just to pause and stop, like actually just stop and breathe, and just use something like box breathing, where you breathe in for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, breathe out for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds. Repeat that a few times. There's even a simple thing called belly button yoga, where you just put your finger in your belly button and just focus on your breath and exhale, inhale. What it does, it just brings you back to center. You can just stop and observe. So mentally take note, even verbalize the things that you can see, which sounds so bizarre, but this is actually a technique when people who have high anxiety or even when they're in shock, like to bring them back, you can just say, what can you see right now? And just start verbalizing. I can see clouds. I can see the grass. I can see a cat. I can see the wind moving the trees. It brings you back to focus and calms the mind. You can also use the concept of a third space, which is any space that isn't work or home. So rather than going straight from work to home, you can transition through a third space, like a coffee shop, drive by the beach, go for a walk in nature, and use that as your transition zone. So it's a chance to go and do a bit of reflective thinking, which is another technique where just hold your phone up in front of your face and just like verbal diarrhea, get it all out. Because often we have all these unclosed loops of thought and they occupy our brain and our synapses are flying around because we haven't finished that train of thought. But just open up your camera and record yourself just talking and let it all come out. And we also call that a download. And this is where you might call someone like a close friend, a trusted peer, and just say, hey, I've just got a download. and you just get it all out. And the thing of a download is you're not looking for help. You're not looking for a reply. You just want to purge it. Sometimes you want a bit of empathy back, like, oh, yeah, that's totally fucked. I can't believe they said that. But really, you're not looking for someone to solve your problems. You're just getting it all out. And another technique that I'll talk about later is a car park, where you park something for later. So rather than it being on your mind, what you do is you might have an Asana board, which I'll also talk about later, or your to-do list. And just maybe if you're getting in the car, like just open a journal, write everything down, all those tasks that you didn't complete today, write it all down. And then you know you're not forgetting about it, you're not dismissing it, but you can park it and come back to it later so you can be fully present right now. Other techniques are to use music. So changing your mindset and mode of action to use through using music to engineer a state. So, I mean, those of you who have kids, you know what happens when you put on the nice soft lullaby when your kids go to bed as opposed to some AC/DC. And it's the same with adults. So we can actually transition our mindset and bring us back to the present moment by using different playlists. So I have about 6 playlists that I've curated around my dad mode, my facilitator mode, my I'm just going to get shit done mode. And there's even apps, like there's a company called Focus at Will that's engineered music with neuroscience, removed all the lyrics, and it's designed to optimize your mental performance when you want to be productive. So you pay a monthly subscription like Spotify, listen to this music, and it keeps you in the zone. They also have a creative mindset version. But also on Spotify, there's some playlists I can share with you that have been engineered again. I think Neural Beats is one of them, where it's just been optimized. There's no lyrics, so there's no emotional triggers. It's just purely music with certain beat to optimize your thought process. So look, they're just some techniques.
Sorry, Aaron, what was the first one you mentioned there?
Focus at Will.
Focus at Will.
Yep.
There's also on YouTube, there's one I use called Alpha Waves. It goes for about an hour. It's very annoying for anybody else who's listening in. For yourself, it just plays just a tone with a couple of other things for an hour. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I'll send you the link.
Yeah. And I really encourage you to think of it as, modes of action. So how do you transition? Like, be very conscious of your transition between different modes so that you're arriving fully present in each new activity you're doing. But yeah, there's some of the techniques. More than happy to share. I think I've got a slide deck somewhere with some content I could drop after this as well. And then last thing on mindset I just want to touch on is, as a founder, so we all know what this feels like as entrepreneurs, and you all described it, right? We've got a dozen competing urgent one priorities at any given point. As we grow the team and grow what we do, it's less hands on the tools and more time managing other people. And the constant balancing act for an entrepreneur is getting their time back. And by that, I mean, we're always having to buy time. And I encourage you to think of it that way, because this really helped me with a bit of an unlock is, as growing a business, I'm always trying to buy back more of my time so I can be on the business, not in it, and get my head above the water, like above the line thinking. So when you think of it that way, like the exchange of money really started where, we had the bartering system, and then eventually, it became a unit economics of our use of time. Like, we can't all be farmers to grow our own food. We also don't have access to all the resources or the quality production. Other people are just better at things. So as a founder, always be thinking like, how can I buy back more of my day so that I can work on the stuff that matters? And you'll see later there's some techniques I've shared in there, but I think that mindset flip. And one thing that the StartMate Accelerator does with their founders is they tell the founders to imagine that their time is worth at least $500 an hour. And so anything you're doing that you could outsource for less, you outsource for less. Because where you want to be focused is on your unique superpower, what you're exceptional at, what brings you passion, and what will have the biggest impact on the business. And I say all that knowing full well that in the early days, we don't all have that luxury. We can't do that. But your goal is to get yourself to that point where you can. So how do you buy back your time so that you can focus on the stuff that you're really good at and the stuff that's going to shift the needle? So that's the mindset stuff. I know I went through that really fast, but does that all make sense? Yeah.
Yeah.
Did everyone get an action item there, like something they're going to take away and do differently?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, I think I probably use the music to reset my brain.
Yeah.
Because I know that works when I have to do housework. So I think it'll probably work for other stuff that I don't want to do either.
Yep. Yes, definitely.
And I think environment plays a big part to me. So that's a big part of why I come back to big spaces. I think being in the space really helps my productivity. And I really find that time in the game helps me. I'm gonna doodle around. I'm gonna do rubbish because it just helps. I don't know. It just seems. I'll once I get into a flow state and I'll punch through. It's just that in split spaces really helps.
Yeah. And is that because you're away from distractions at home, or is it because you're around a group of like-minded people? Like, what is it for you?
I think it's probably that second one. It's seeing other people work. I don't know. It just seems really focused. Like at home I'll be still working and I'll be still doing stuff. It just seems that my flow state seems to improve when I'm here. I don't know why. But as soon as, and I noticed this originally, is that I just get stuff done, in a much more efficient rate.
Yep.
Not sure.
I'm the same. I found that.
Yeah.
I
don't know whether it's other people around or I don't know what the
peer pressure.
Peer pressure. Yeah. Everyone else is working. I guess we work.
That's right. Yeah.
You make yourself more accountable too. Like today's only my first day in the space, and for the last 2 days, I'm like, all right, I've got to be prepared for today. Like I've got to get stuff done for today, and today you've got to get stuff done. Whereas if I wasn't coming in here and be like, I'll do it next week. That's right.
Yeah.
You feel like you have to get something done because you're coming in here.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, and look, we're social creatures, so we tend to mimic the behavior of the people closest to us. So if we surround ourselves with people who are getting it done, then we're more likely to get it done. And this also plays in the reverse. If you surround yourself with people who, want to stop work at 1 o'clock and go to the pub for a beer, then that's what we end up doing. So it is, you do really need to be conscious of who you're working around and their, I guess, habits, because they do sort of osmosis over, but also, like you just said, it's about knowing what works for you. And also knowing that sometimes it's the change that actually has the impact. So you might go into a co-working space and you'll be incredibly productive, but then those productivity triggers wear off after a period of time, and then you need to change again. And maybe going back home might actually then cause you to be more productive. So it is really about knowing yourself really well, identifying your triggers. But that's awesome. Next in this section, I'm going to talk about, I've called it alignment, but really this is about how do you get more time back. So all of us at the moment feel time poor. So the very first step, if we're going to get better use of time, the very first step is actually we need to create space. So we need to clear the decks, do a bit of a reset, take stock of how we're spending our time and make sure that we're spending it on the right things so that we've got some more time back to invest. And again, going back to the language bit, as well as stopping the use of the word busy, stop talking about how you spend your time. Talk about how you invest your time, because you have a finite quantity left. One of the guys that I coach, he just bought this. You can go online and order these posters, which shows the average life expectancy as boxes, which are fortnights. And you put in your age and it actually pre-blacks out. And so you get this poster you stick up on your wall and it's like a ticking clock of how much of your life you have left, which sounds a bit morbid and depressing, but fuck, it's inspiring as well. I don't know the website, but you can Google it and find it. But his wife freaked out thinking that he was celebrating the end of his life. He's like, no, this is a reminder to enjoy it. So what we're going to talk about now is how do you buy back more of your time? And one thing I want to share, so you asked how do you focus was one of the questions, and particularly when you've got competing buckets. And I'll share this story. So we use this concept called a boat statement, and it came from the British men's 8 rowing team that won the won gold at the Sydney 2000 Games. And before that, the UK men's 8s hadn't won a medal it was over 20 years. I think it was like 24, 28 years of Olympic Games. So it was this big turnaround. And when asked, like, how did you guys go from this poor track record to winning gold in Sydney 2000? They said it all came down to this one statement that everyone lived by, this one question for the 2 years of training. And it was, will it make the boat go faster? So for the 2 years that the men's 8 crew was training, every time they did anything, they asked that question. So when they reached for a beer on a Friday night, the question in their head was, will it make the boat go faster? No. Well, I'm not having the beer. And will I have that block of chocolate? chocolate? No, it won't make the boat go faster. And it got to the point, even at the Sydney Olympic Games opening ceremony, they were the only team that didn't go to the opening ceremony because it wouldn't make the boat go faster. And in fact, during the whole Olympic Games, they didn't go to any of the athlete village activities because it wouldn't make the boat go faster. So it's this really simple concept, have a boat statement. So the question then becomes, what's your boat statement, right? For whatever it is you're doing, what's your boat statement? And you can apply, the question then becomes, well, if I've got a bucket, I don't want to sacrifice time with my family because that won't make the boat go faster. So then becomes this question of, what are you willing to pay? What's the price you're willing to pay to make the boat go faster, whatever that metaphor is for you and your business? I share this because it's ultimately, it's great to have goals, but it needs to convert into a decision-making framework. Like, you need some way of assessing opportunities to know what you're saying yes and no to. And by having this basic question phrased for your business or whatever you're focused on, it gives you that focus and it gives you a way to say yes and no to things. It's also great for unifying teams. So when you have a team, getting everyone to actually consistently work and row the boat in the same direction is actually really freaking hard. Because you as the owner, to you it's so obvious, and then you find out your staff member's been working on some stupid priority for the last 2 weeks, and you just think, what a waste of your time, why were you doing that? And it's when everyone's rowing in different directions. So this is a nice, simple way to keep everyone in alignment. So as an activity for after this session, it might be worth you just thinking about, what is your boat statement? And it could be a small one for your health, it could be a big one for your family, it could be one for your business. The challenge with having multiple boat statements is then they compete. So then you need a prioritization. You need to know, well, in this time, I'm blocking this out. This is my time for making the boat go faster. And in this time, it's the time for making my relationship more meaningful. And in this time, it's whatever. But it's a nice little simple technique. I really loved it when I heard it. And then you guys have probably all heard this one. Have you guys heard of the rocks, pebbles, and sand in the jar?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So I won't dwell on this one too much, but the idea is you have to focus on your big rocks first. The big rocks being the most important things. The jar is the metaphor for your week, the amount of time that we have. It's limited. You can't make that any bigger. So put your big rocks in first, the most important things. And then the next level of important things are the pebbles, and they'll fit around the big rocks. And then finally you put in the sand, which is all the life admin crap. And that goes in last because the sand, again, will filter around the pebbles. And as you can see from the picture here, if you do it in the reverse order, the big rocks just don't fit. You end up with these vacant holes of space. It doesn't properly fill. So put your big rocks first, whatever you prioritize. So again, it's a nice little activity you can do is just draw a jar and some big rocks, pebbles, and sand and actually label what they are for you. And then make sure, going back to the slide before where we make the pie chart of our week, make sure that that pie chart where you're spending most of your time is one of those big pebbles, like the big rocks. Make sure that aligns, because often it doesn't. Next, I'm going to introduce the Eisenhower Matrix. Have any of you heard of this before?
Yes, and I love this so much.
I love it too. Yeah. So this came from General Eisenhower, and it's basically a way of mapping your use of time. So I encourage you to do it as an end-of-month retrospective. And basically, you have two axes on a chart. One is urgent, not urgent, and one is important, not important. And it gives you these 4 quadrants. And you just map, go through your calendar for the last 30 days. Where'd you spend your time? And map it into one of those 4 boxes. So what were you doing that's important? What were you doing that was urgent? What's just not important? So like social media, right? Most of the time, most of the stuff we do on social media isn't important and it's not urgent. And so it's down in quadrant 4. And yet we can waste a lot of frigging time there. So once you do that exercise, you can then identify what you should be focused on and what you should be getting rid of. And everything above the line is where you should be spending your time. And everything below the line is what you should be getting rid of. The question inherently becomes, well, hang on, what's important? Because we all have different priorities. And if I'm thinking in a work context, this is important. If I'm thinking in a life context, this is important. So it's whatever it means to you. And same with urgent. And it's funny how things can change, but we usually treat urgent as something that has a deadline and something that's not urgent as something that doesn't. So quality time with loved ones usually ends up like it's important, but it's not urgent. And so what happens is that schedule 2 box is the one that we just never get to. And they're the most important things that are just left undone. So your goal is to work through quadrant 1 as quick as possible and to focus on quadrant 2, like scheduling quadrant 2 so it actually happens. And then everything below you get rid of, whether it's like quadrant 3, you delegate it, so outsource it, make it into a systemized process, make procedures around it, make it faster, whatever. Or number 4, where we just completely detonate it, like just get rid of it. Now, an interesting extra step here is to do this. So Brad Feld, who's a venture capitalist out of the US, quite a famous person in the startup community, he does this monthly retrospective, but instead of urgent, he does happiness. So is it important and does it bring me joy? And he's slowly removing from his life all the things that just take his energy away, because he knows anything, you guys would all relate to this. When you do that thing and you just hate doing, it puts you in this funky mood that makes you less productive and you get less done. So you can apply the same thing to a happiness measure as well. Anyway, great little tool. It's something we do with a lot of the people we work with as an end of month review. I find it really powerful. And again, there's templates and I can drop some links and stuff afterwards as well. Which then comes back to this point of which you raised at the start as well, which is we all know we work best when there's a deadline. And often having a really short amount of time to do something makes us get it done better than when we have ages for it. And there's a couple of TED Talks on this and why we procrastinate and the power of procrastination. But one way around this is to make artificial deadlines. So that quadrant 2 stuff that's not urgent, how do you make it urgent? So one way to do this is to pre-commit to a client to have something to them by a set date, even if they haven't asked for it by then. So when a client says something, blah, blah, say, I'm going to get this to you by next Monday, because then immediately you've got a deadline. And you can do this in your personal life too. Make commitments to your family. You can put something on social media. I'm going to do this in the next 7 days, because now, people know. So just make up artificial deadlines. Reduce the amount of time you have to do something. If you've got all week to do it, just give yourself 2 hours to get it done. It's really powerful. And another little thing I'll just share is, I think I got this from Derek Sivers. I encourage you to read a lot of his content. It's really powerful. But who instead of how? So anytime you have something to do, we naturally, as entrepreneurs, we naturally just roll up our sleeves and get it done. I mean, that's what we're good at. But what I encourage you to ask is, who else could I get to do this for me? Because again, you want to buy back more time, and your job as an entrepreneur is actually grow. And it's funny, like the entrepreneurs I work with, some of the most successful entrepreneurs I work with, and I need to be careful how I phrase this because this is meant as a compliment, but they just have no freaking clue. But because they have no clue, what it means is they're really good at asking for help and getting others to do stuff for them, because they can't do it themselves. And I see a real problem when we have, super intelligent founders who can sort of do anything. They're a jack of all trades, because what happens is they get stuck doing everything. And sometimes you're actually much smarter if you're a bit dumber, in the sense, and I mean that in the sense of you don't know how to do something, rather than upskilling yourself, just to go, I don't need to learn this. Who can I get to do this instead? And so that little phrase, who instead of how, I think is a great decision-making tool that you can use when you're looking at how you spend your time. So can you delegate it? Can you outsource it? A great outsourcing tool I use a lot now is Upwork. So I'll just go on there and post little jobs. So for example, video editing, I create a lot of content each week. Rather than do it myself, go on Upwork, get someone else to do it. It's a pretty small outlay in comparison to my time, and even if I think I could do it better, the point is it gets done without me, so I can do other things. So who instead of how, I find really powerful.
That is 100% me, and the reason why my business continually stalls is because I can do every single job in my business, and it is the worst thing.
Yeah.
So, and in fact, somebody said to me not that long ago, because I had this idea, it's like, okay, maybe I can go and do an MBA or do a degree. And then they were like, why don't you just hire somebody who's already got that? And I was like, yes. So, for me, it is like making that other person the expert. So I need to learn how to do that.
Yeah. Well, the first thing is to recognize it. So like you said, so I think for me, I've got some mantras I put up on my wall. They're not really mantras, but they're like filters. So little sayings. So who instead of how was on my wall for a long time to remind me, every time I look up, I see it. It's to remind me to make that decision. But, even when we are really good at something, even when we absolutely enjoy it, that still doesn't mean we should be doing it. So even if we are the world's best bookkeeper and we really love it, it still doesn't make sense for us to be spending our time there because there's an opportunity cost. Yeah. There's other things that will have bigger value for the business. So it's really important we think of that opportunity cost and we think of what price we're really paying by doing it ourselves. And then that might help prompt us to outsource it. So that's sort of the how do we buy back time. So what we covered just then, just for the quick recap, buying back time by saying no to things. And the will it make the boat go faster boat statement is a great way to have focus. Another way is to look at making sure that we're working on the right things. So saying no to the sand and saying yes to the pebbles. In other words, prioritizing what we're saying yes to first. And I should say as well, there is an evolution of yes. So when we're first starting out in business, the reality is we have to say yes to a lot of things. And the reason for that is, number one, we don't know what's going to work yet. We don't know what the best use of our time is when we're first starting out. We have to say yes to everything because it's an experiment. Like we don't know is it going to be Facebook ads, direct email campaigns, direct mail, a TV ad? What's going to be the best marketing for this particular product in this particular market? We don't know yet because we haven't done it. So we have to say yes to everything and do the experiment. And we have to say yes to all the speaking opportunities and yes to all the publicity. But over time, the evolution of yes becomes you get much clearer what to say no to. So even though I'm saying all these things, there are moments. The other thing is we have to build credibility. So in the early days, you say yes to everything so that you build credibility. And now over time, you get to say no to more things because you have that credibility. We talked about the Eisenhower Matrix, both with urgent, important, and also important happiness. We talked about creating artificial deadlines to buy back more of your time so that you don't procrastinate and waste time. We talked about who instead of how. So how do you outsource, delegate? And next, we're going to look at the toolkit. So these are all technique type things. But how are we going so far? Has this been useful so far? Are we, yep? Cool.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. I'm not moving too fast.
Recapping the details there.
No, it's going well.
Good, good.
So in this next evolution, looking at what we call the toolkit, which these are just techniques to be more productive and also to focus on the right things. So there's, I think I've dropped about 20 in here. Starting with one thing that I am absolutely a massive advocate of, which is your day starts, the way your day starts defines the entire rest of your day. So we encourage you to use a concept called the pre-dawn. And the pre-dawn is where you wake up 2 hours earlier than you have to use that time for you. So this isn't about getting more work done. This is about making the best version of you every single morning. So you start the day with your cup full. For those of you who have kids, you know that feeling when your kids are little babies and they wake you up and you're starting the day constantly reacting. Like there's no time for self. There's no sense of being proactive. It's just you're constant reacting to the needs of others. And that's why we can get really short and shitty. So anytime you feel impatient or you're getting frustrated by others wasting your time, or that sort of anger and resentment about other people using your time, it means you haven't actually taken time for yourself first. Because when you start with time for yourself first, then you feel your cup's full. So it turns out that 75% of all the 75% of the CEOs of the biggest companies in the world and the fastest growing companies actually all use this pre-dawn moment. Now, if you do shift work or you work a different time zone, whatever, the pre-dawn, you just shift it however suits you. But the point is to have 2 hours of your morning that's just for you to use it for yourself. So this can be exercise, it can be reading, it can be meditation, it can be yoga. It could be just time in nature. It could be going for a surf, a bike ride, whatever sets your soul on fire. The point is it's time for you. So I do this religiously. Then one question that often comes up is, there's an assumption that getting up earlier means less sleep. And no, it shouldn't, because sleep is absolutely critical. Like if you fuck up your sleep, so having less than 8 hours sleep for 3 consecutive nights is the equivalent of arriving at work with a blood alcohol limit of 0.05. So most of us are spending most of our life actually drunk. Like we're incapacitated in some way. Maybe it's only 5% less than optimal. Maybe it's 20% less than optimal. We don't even realize it because we just live in this state. And on holidays when you get your sleep and you really feel rest and suddenly you have all this clarity and you notice colors more and you notice smells more, it's because our brain is actually functioning the way it should. So using the pre-dawn to set yourself up for the best psychology for the day doesn't mean less sleep. It just means going to bed earlier. And going to bed earlier means you've got to really sort your night routine. So it's one of those things, like many of us end our day with, lying on the couch in front of Netflix, drinking red wine because we've had this, we're depleted and we feel like we need this recovery. But if you actually start your day where your cup is full, you end the day not depleted. You actually end the day feeling that you don't need those moments. But yeah, sleep is absolutely critical. Obviously, we all need different amounts. There's a great book called Why We Sleep, which if you want to find out more about sleep, it's a good one to read. But it just means to get that pre-dawn moment, you just have to shift your body clock. And there's a process to do that. Sunday's prep day. So this might sound like, oh my God, Aaron, we're entrepreneurs and we're talking about productivity and time management and you're telling me to do prep. But the thing is, if we set up our week right, so if we design our optimal week, that starts on the Sunday when we do some prep for the week ahead. Now, some people do meal prep and that's awesome. When we talk about meal prep, it's not just, pre-cooking something, it's planning your meals in advance. And you might not want to do this, and I get that reaction sometimes, but what this does, it reduces decision fatigue. So remember at the start, many of you commented about you've constantly got all these things on your mind and you never actually get clarity. You never actually get to be fully present. You always feel distracted. This is about removing all of that. So reduce the decision fatigue by planning your meals in advance, even if you're just planning what you're going to cook rather than cooking in advance. So what I do on a Sunday, I go through my calendar, look at my week ahead. What have I got on this week? What days do I have my kids? Where do they need to be? What sports do they have? What clothes do they need? Making sure all my laundry's done. Making sure that I've done my grocery shopping once so that I don't get to a Thursday night where I'm delivering a webinar until 9 and I haven't eaten and I feel shit and it's not my best performance. I'm getting hangry. So doing all that in advance. The other part of this is also looking at your psychological state for the week ahead. So when you look at your calendar for the week, actually thinking about how are you going to feel in every one of those moments? And then what do I need to engineer my psychology for the week? So some techniques I use is if I know I've got something emotionally confronting coming up. So I'm recently separated. Dates like anniversaries or even my kids' birthdays can be emotional triggers for me. So knowing that, sometimes what I do is I pre-schedule an SMS to go to myself in the future. So I use a platform like SMS Burst. And it's something as simple as, hey, Aaron, I bet right now you're feeling this. That's totally natural, dickhead, because you're going through this and you should be feeling that. And it's a weird little psychological trick. When I get that message in the future, it's like, oh yeah, actually it normalizes the emotion and it removes the pressure of having that emotion and it sort of removes the trigger. So there's all sorts of things you can do. Knowing what you need in those moments to bring you back into alignment and how what your emotional week's going to look like, and starting to plan for that in advance. Maybe for you, it's like, who do I need around me? Maybe it's reaching out to a friend to support you in those moments. But it's a really good way to engineer your mindset for the entire week is just to use Sunday as your prep day. That all make sense?
Yep.
Cool. Does anyone use Sunday as their prep day? Does anyone do meal prep, for example?
Well, we actually do, and I always have the kids on a Sunday afternoon because my ex-husband has them on the weekends, right? And so my partner and I, we have Sunday afternoon. If anybody asks us to do anything on a Sunday afternoon, we immediately say no. Like, it is no, I don't care if the Queen's coming to town. We do not do Sunday afternoon.
Yep.
And that is our day to prepare for the week. And it's the meal prep, it's the making sure we've got assignments, it's all of that stuff. We have a family meeting, and sometimes that family meeting is around The Simpsons, but that's what we've been doing, and that's been really, really helpful for us to get our week sorted. Don't worry, we still run out of groceries on a Thursday afternoon, but that Sunday night at least sets us up for the next couple of days. And yeah, we've been doing that for a while, and it's really good.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I should say, look, all of these techniques, as much as they might come across as being prescriptive, it's really about finding what works for you. Like, how do you so my point is with each of these, it's like, how do I make this work for me? What does this need to look like for me is the best way to look at it. You can go to the extreme. So Mark Zuckerberg, I've got on here, prepare your clothing for the week. And this is all about removing decision fatigue. But Mark Zuckerberg just has he wears the exact same thing every single day. 5 grey T-shirts, blue jeans, because he wants to remove all of the decision-making processing power out of his head so he can focus on other things. So for him, that's his mechanism for being more present in the moment, is to just live as simply with all this shit that doesn't matter. So you can go to that extreme, but it's really, you know, finding what works for you. Next is looking at your week in terms of your flow state. So I think someone before mentioned flow state, but each of us are different, and each of us do different work. We all respond to our environment differently, but we tend to have reasonably consistent physiological responses to our workflow and our behavior. And what I mean by that is, you know, depending on your weekend, coming out of the weekend for some people, they're exhausted because they've gone off and trekked for 50 kilometers and had this amazing adventure. And then they come back at work and they see work as, I'm going to sit at my desk and work is my recovery time. For other people, the weekend is their recovery time. So for some, Monday mornings are sort of that boot up where it's like, I'm getting back into the flow. Tuesdays, Wednesdays typically are peak energy, where you get a lot done. They're good for tackling big problems. And by the time we get to Friday, we tend to have that lower runoff energy. Now, everyone's unique. Everyone's different here. And you can actually engineer these. So what I encourage you to think is, even though you are that way, it doesn't mean you have to stay that way. You can actually engineer your float states. But knowing this, you can then map what you do at different points in time. So the point of this one is that as much as we talk about being more productive and as much as we talk about strategically using our time, we need to make sure that we're doing the right things in the right moments to match our physiology and our mood. So even looking at your day, so the science is we actually are our most creative and have our best problem-solving ability in early mornings. So, and there's specific times, and this is why the pre-dawn actually works quite well, is that clarity of thinking, even though we might be running on the treadmill, what our brain is processing in that time and the thoughts that we're having give us much greater clarity than the way we think later in the day. So again, engineering, like most of us take our meetings in the morning, like we'll schedule all our meetings over coffee in the morning. We're actually wasting our most productive mental capacity. Like if we use that time in the morning for self-work and use the afternoons when we're a bit bored and, you know, restless for coffee catch-ups or just meetings, it's a more efficient use of our time in terms of actually maximizing our brain output. So be really conscious of your flow. Does this resonate for everyone? Like, do you all feel this sense of you have a certain flow, a natural state? So, yeah, so one thing I'll do is block out my calendar. So Mondays are purely for me. Mornings I'll block out in different ways where it's like no meeting mornings. And I block out certain times to be really focused with my kids because particularly in the afternoons when I have a different energy state, there's no point me working there because a task will take me twice as long as if I do it the next morning. So being conscious of your flow can be really powerful. And the other part of this is then engineering it. So if you know that, I'm going to pick on surfing because I've got a quote here from someone, but if you know that surfing just makes you more energized and gives you clarity and you do your best problem solving when you're surfing, then actually making that part of your day is really valuable. So Sarah Beardmore is a retired pro surfer. She has 2 tech startups. Well, I think she actually just sold one of them. But what she does every week, she lives in Byron, and every Sunday her prep is to look at the surf conditions for the entire week. Like, what is the best time to be surfing every single day? And she puts that in her calendar. That's the number one priority of her day. And then everything else fills around it. And she does that because she knows that when she's out surfing, it's like her soul fuel. When she comes back, she's more energized. When she has a big problem to solve, something that's on her mind, she gets the answer when she's out the back of the break. And it even happened, she had an investor flying up from Sydney to meet her, and the particular meeting overlapped with the best surf. So she actually rang up the investor and said, "Oh, sorry, I can't meet with you on Wednesday anymore because I'll be surfing." And she thought, that's it, the investor will just give up and walk away. But the investor was actually like, well, I love the fact that you prioritize yourself in this way and you understand yourself at this level. So he just changed the time that they met and they still caught up. But I think we don't prioritize this stuff enough. Actually, we do the opposite. When we're busy, how many of us sacrifice the things that sustain us? Like we stop exercising, we reduce our sleep, we stay up late working, we eat shit. Like most of us do the opposite of what we should be doing, which is doubling down on these things that keep us going and sustain us. So making time for, filling your cup and your soul fuel is really important. It's actually really important. And from personal experience, when you have an investor who challenges you on this, or you have a co-founder who challenges you on this, I would say walk away from them because they don't get it. And there's so much burnout in the Silicon Valley culture of just work, and that you should be doing 100 hours a week. And if you're not, then you're failing. I think it's total BS. When you look at the science, that those that perform the best actually prioritize this sort of stuff, because the burnout rates in startup land are ridiculous. And ultimately, we're all building for a reason. There's a measure of success that we want that involves our health and our ability to spend time with loved ones. And if we kill ourselves in the process, then we're actually not achieving anything. Well, that's my view. So I think it's important. Are any of you, like, you recognize your flow, like what gives you that, your juice is flowing, that you sort of schedule into your life and prioritize?
Oh, absolutely. I think exercise is a big one for me.
Yeah.
Things deteriorate productivity if I don't prioritize that.
Yeah. It's so true. How do you go, Trish? Like, if you miss a morning of exercise, how do you feel the rest of the day?
Well, I've recently, because my routine was out of whack, went for about 6 months with not being consistent with my exercise, and that's probably a good 6 months after 20 years of being really consistent. So it threw me completely out of whack.
Yep.
Happy to say I'm back on the bandwagon and doing things all right again now, but it really did, stuff around with my mental health. I mean, if you're not going to train, I may as well drink beer and eat pizza, and if I'm drinking beer and eating pizza, it's, all of a sudden why work, everything. It's
totally. Yes, it's exactly like, for me, it is like that domino effect. So true.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, so I think it's about kickstarting that, and that's why. And I always like to train in the mornings as well, because it's just a great start to the day. You go and put that effort in, and then you're less likely to make poor choices around what you're going to have for lunch. Rather than undo, your morning's workout, you feel like you want to actually support it. So it's just the accumulation of wins there.
Yeah.
I must say, Aaron, I recognise what gets me going at my best time, but they're actually contradictory, and I've really got to think about it, how I can rejig those, because my best time of day is 10 p.m. to 2 a.m.
Right.
And the thing that gets me creative and excited and relaxed is baking. So both of those things are not conducive to either of my positive resets. So I've really got to try and think about how I can rework those, that's for sure.
Yeah. I love the baking. I think that's such a, like, if you can find moments to schedule that in. And look, it doesn't have to be daily. You find your moment during the week. The other one about the nighttime. So this comes up a lot. I'm more than happy to introduce you to someone called Graham Fellows. He looks after the MBA program at QT, but he recently went through one of our programs, and he was the same. Like, the kids would go down to bed at sort of 10 o'clock at night, and he would work through until sometimes 3 or 4 in the morning, and then a couple of hours sleep and go again.
Yeah, I only go to bed at 3 or 4 because I know I've got to get up and go to work.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'd keep going.
Yeah, he was exactly the same. And look, he did the experiment and flipped it and used the pre-dawn. And his feedback, this was his experience, was that what he thought was productive before, he realized wasn't. And as much as he was getting a lot done in that time, he found by flipping his day around, it changed his energy levels, and he actually got much more done in less time. So sometimes we have a pattern of behavior and we think it's working, and until we do the experiment of the counter experiment, we don't know. But for you might find that that's what it is.
I know, because I do a lot of a lot of our holidays are international. Yeah. And I spent 4 years living in the US, and I find that when I'm on the other side of the clock, it's a lot different for me from an energy level, but it could also be because I'm on holidays. But every time I say, oh, I'm going to try and keep this biological clock going when I get home, and start getting up early, and I'm just smashed.
Yeah.
I try. So I'd be really interested to talk to that fellow to see how we kind of reset it and turn it around, because I've tried a number of times and it just wrecks me.
Yeah, and that's the other part. The transition through it is hard, like really hard. It can be anywhere from like 2 weeks to 6 months, that transition. And look, it doesn't work for everyone, but Yeah.
I'd certainly like to give it a go. That's for sure.
Next technique I have here is something called micro resolutions. I can't remember who this came from. I was going to say Mel Robbins, but it's not Mel Robbins. But I might have the person on the next slide. But this is about breaking down. Remember, we were talking about those not urgent tasks, like in the Eisenhower Matrix quadrant 2. So the things that aren't urgent, we tend not to get to. But also, this is sort of like chunking when you have a big task, breaking it down into a small task that you do every single day. So one way to approach writing a grant, for example, is just to block out 8 hours and sit there and punch it out. Another way to do it is just say, right, I'm going to spend 15 minutes on it every day. So every morning, 15 minutes on this task. Another example would be if you want to learn guitar, rather than saying, well, I'm going to learn guitar, or rather than saying, I'm going to learn to play one song, just make the commitment, I'm going to practice for 10 minutes every morning. Because it creates a habit, and also something you schedule first thing in your day is more likely to get done. So the same with exercise. For those of you who've experimented with exercising first thing versus at lunchtime, like for me, I tried it, and every time it's lunchtime, there's always some other priority comes up and I justify why I can skip it, whereas when it's morning, it gets done. So whatever you put first in your day gets done, and a micro resolution is just about blocking out a small bit of your time to work on something. So if you want to create more content for your business, maybe just have 10 minutes every morning, I'm going to write. It doesn't matter if it's shit, good, whatever, I'm just going to get it done. I'm going to write for 10 minutes every day. But it's really effective. It's really powerful, and it obviously compounds over time when you do it every single day. Eat the frog. So Brian Tracy, actually it could have been Brian Tracy who talked about micro resolutions as well. But this concept of eat the frog, you know those toad tasks, like those tasks that you just don't want to do, they suck. You avoid it. Whenever it comes up on your to-do list, suddenly you've done all the house cleaning, you've cleaned the toilet even, and you still haven't done the bloody thing. That they're toad tasks. And this eat the frog concept from Brian Tracy is all about you put them first in your day. So block out, one thing I have in my calendar is 30 minutes on a Monday morning for my toad tasks. And that's to do the thing that I've been avoiding. And the thing about putting it first in your day and getting it done is it removes that stress of it sitting in your head. Because what happens when you avoid your toad tasks and they build up, the frog just gets bigger and bigger. And then you start shitting all over yourself. You're like, my God, I'm hopeless. Why did I not do it? I just avoid this. I can't do anything. So it ends up in this negative thought pattern. But also by getting it done first thing in your day, then everything afterwards seems really easy in comparison. So whatever the hardest thing is you have to do today, put it first in your day, and then everything else on your to-do list will just seem like a breeze afterwards. It's a really simple technique. So I recommend that one. And then the other way of looking at what you put first in your day is to look at all those little small tasks, because often when we have lots of little things to do, like the little quick wins, they may be only 5-minute tasks. When we have lots of them, they accumulate and they end up this big burden on our head, and we're thinking about them all the time. So just allocate 30 minutes of your morning just to get all those little quick wins done. And this could be life admin too. Often we think, I'm going into work, I shouldn't be using this time for life admin. But if that's occupying your brain and it's chewing away processing power, then spending 30 minutes just to I'm going to do a short sprint of 30 minutes of life admin. So the car insurance is done, you've checked your life insurance, you've moved those funds, whatever it is, all done, gone. Now I've got clarity. My head is back to inbox 0, I can go again. And so one way of engineering this is to have really effective use of your to-do list. And something I encourage as well, if you've got some bad habits or you tend to get distracted, is having not to-do lists. So this is where you actually write down not just, here's my 3 things for the day that have to get done. They are non-negotiables, but also writing down, do not do this. It's like, Aaron, dickhead, stop doing this stuff. Don't do this today, because it'll just take away your time. So having a not to-do list can be effective. For me personally, I use an Asana board. And in Asana, there's 2 main ones I'll talk about. I have my to-do list, which is everything. And then I have today. And what I do at the start, sometimes I do it the night before, but definitely first thing in the morning, is drag out of my to-do list into my today list. And I might have anything from 3 to 6 things in my today list. And I drag and order them in priority. And I have to absolutely get them done that day. And my to-do list, the backlog, ends up becoming my parking lot. So over the course of the day, if something comes up and it's not one of those things on my to-do list, I add it to the today list. I add it to my backlog, the to-do list. So I have the Asana app on my phone. Often I'll be usually it's when I'm driving or I'm out doing something with the kids. It's like, oh, I didn't do that. I'll just open Asana, drop it in there into my to-do list, and then I know it's in the backlog, like it's in the car park, and I can forget about it. Rather than having to constantly think about it, I've got to remember to do that, got to remember to do that. It's just parked.
Yeah, I've got Asana here, so I can show you. I've got all that as well, so I can show you my Asana and how I sort it. So,
awesome. Yeah. That's cool. Yeah, I used to be paper-based. I have these big Post-it notes on my desk, and I would write my 3 things on there for the day and just do that every morning. But now I'm a total Asana convert, because the problem with having these on my desk is when I have my thoughts, out with the kids, like I was saying, I've got no way of adding to it, like all my paper-based stuff. So then I create another list and I'd end up with all this paper everywhere.
Yes.
Asana's really working for me right now in terms of my workflow.
I list at work, list at home, list at my phone.
Yeah. Well, because we can all, the other way, like, when we have 50 tabs open because there are all these things in our web browser we haven't finished, and then it becomes this distraction. It also slows down our computer's processing power. But just dragging them, like drag the link into Asana, into your backlog, like into to do, and then you'll revisit it later. It's just another nice, simple way to remove all the visual distractors that we have. Talked about the parking lot. The only thing I haven't said, so parking lot is just this concept of let's park it. So you can use this in team meetings when conversations get distracted. You can use it when you're working on something and someone sends a message. Don't get back to them in that moment. Just park it, add it to your Asana to work on later. But the thing about a parking lot is you actually have to schedule some time to go through your parking lot items, because you can't just keep building this massive parking lot of things you never get to. And particularly when you use the parking lot with someone else. So imagine you're working with your co-founder and you're talking about your pricing, and your co-founder says, hey, look, I really want to talk about our outsourcing to John because it's not working. And you say, well, let's park that for later. The problem is your co-founder can feel dismissed. Like, it can have an emotional impact that you're just ignoring something that's important to them. So it's important that they know that something's scheduled for later. Like, once a week you have your parking lot half hour, for example, and you'll sit down as a team and what's in the parking lot that we need to talk about, and let's get it done. So you can't just park things for Neverland. You've got to park it for a moment where you go through the car park. How are we going so far? Are we feeling good? Yep. Are we getting some action items out of this?
Yep.
Is there, like, if it's off track, let me know, because I'd much rather make sure we're delivering value. So if you're finding this isn't useful, like, shout that out, because I'm more than happy to deviate, talk about something else that's on your mind.
For me, it's really good because a lot of this stuff, like, I'm like, oh yeah, I need to do that. Like, I know that, and I'm like, it's reminding me. It's like, oh yes, I do. Like, do the thing, not just get that. That's really good. But for me, that Parked website, I did that one day, and I put down just under 200 blog posts that I had that I needed to write. They're in their part. But now you're right. I got to go back in and write them. Like, so I think it's like there's a lot of things I'm like, oh yeah. Remembering that, yes, that is something that I need to do. So it's really helpful.
That's good. Yeah, and it is about the doing. So, and that's the thing, when we wrap this up today, it is important to take some time to actually focus on the doing part.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same. When I read audiobooks, I write notes as I go, or I should say when I listen to audiobooks, and I always try and make it an action item, and then I put it in my or into my Asana board. So I don't want to just consume the knowledge. I actually want it to change me in some way or change my behavior. But that requires it to be scheduled. I'm also conscious that we've been going for an hour. If anyone needs a loo break or water or anything, like, please feel free to grab something. Like, don't wait for me to stop. I won't be offended. But we'll keep plugging along. So are any of you familiar with Pomodoros?
What is that, sorry, Matt?
Pomodoros. Have any of you used a Pomodoro before?
Not me.
There's another one, but it's not. I just forgot what it's called. That's where you do like 20 to 5, 25, 20, that sort of thing. Yeah. So Pomodoro is just a format for focused work sprints. So you can define what works for you. We normally have 2 formats in the events that we run. One is a short Pomodoro, where basically you work for 25 minutes and then take a 5-minute break. And then you work for 25 minutes, take a 5-minute break. And you do that cycle 4 times.
But what it is, in that 25 minutes, you're just 100% focused. So you don't look at your phone, you don't get distracted over here. And there's even apps that you can download. So on my MacBook, I have an app called Focus, and I put in there the timer for my sprint, and it automatically counts it down. But what it also does is it locks off my, I can choose what it locks off, but it could lock off internet access, it could lock off certain applications, block you from certain websites. So if you know you get really easily distracted, and it turns off notifications. And then in that 5 minutes, that's your reward time. So you can pre-describe what that reward is. You know, you can get up and do something else, get up and physically move, get some sunlight, go and get distracted on social media in that 5 minutes, whatever you want to do, that's your playtime. And then you come back and focus again for 25. You can also do a long form where it's 45 minutes and then usually like a 10 or 15 minute break. But the science behind it shows that we can only focus for so long with that sort of intensity, and then we need a break reward system, and then focus, break reward, focus, break reward. So I use these quite a lot. I get a lot done in these sprints. And we actually run events around this, so you can run your own events, but it's good to do it with a group of people where you come together. So you guys could all do this, right? You guys could all say, hey, every Wednesday, why don't we have a little, we call them done days, but why don't we have a work sprint day where we just have a timer on the wall and we all do some Pomodoros sprints for the day and get our shit done. Now, the key part of it is preparing you to do this coming in so that you don't waste time on the day working out what to do. You just work through it. But back to your comment about the content, you can use this same approach like Pomodoro sprints for a focused day of creating content. It's like, today I'm going to write 3 blogs, and you just go and smash them out in your Pomodoro sprints. Yeah. Similar sort of concept to using that as a day, things like they're sometimes called ship it days, or also dubbed as FedEx days out of the US, or even just a make a day. So a ship it day is where you go, like some startups will use this, where we're going to create a new product and ship it in a day. So maybe when we say product, it might be some new little feature of what you're offering, or it might, for you, it might be a new email campaign. You go, we're going to come together as a team and get this done in one day. You can also do these little hack days or maker days so a hack day can be, so particularly when you have a bigger team and you've got, the CFO has some challenge with something, or maybe, the accounts team has some challenge, and everyone comes together to solve that for them. So you get all this different groupthink, or different non-groupthink. Or maker days. So Google employees have these regular maker days they also call it 10% time. So when you're an employee at Google, you can use 10% of your time or some teams it's up to 20% of their time, to work on something new. So not their normal day-to-day job. They get to just choose what they work on, something new, something creative, making a new product, whatever. But actually scheduling out time where you're not just working in the business, you're working on the business, and blocking that day out. That's your day. So for me, before I said Mondays I block out, that's my day. Like I use that for my stuff, and that's me thinking on the business, what do I need to be doing, rather than just delivering or reacting. So these are all days that you can schedule into your week, whatever works for you. Is it a ship it day where you're looking to write your content and get it published? Is it a hack day where you're looking to build something new? Is it a maker day where you're looking for creative time to think on the business rather than taking meetings on that day? But carving out blocks of time is really important. Another thing to consider is an accountability group. So I mentioned you guys could come together, but accountability groups are really powerful. And this is where they can run in all different formats. So they could be a daily stand-up where you Zoom call each other. It could be just you drop a message in Slack. It could be where you do a weekly face-to-face or a monthly face-to-face, whatever works for you. But basically you just say, here's the goal I'm working on. This is what I did yesterday. This is what I'm doing today. And this is where I'm stuck. These are my blockers. And the rest of the group is there to call out your BS and to ask the tough questions like, well, is that really the best use of your time? Or have you thought about doing X, Y, Z? When you said you didn't get to that this week, like why didn't you get to it? What went wrong there? So you guys having a little accountability group, the goal of it is peer-to-peer accountability to make sure that you're actually getting your stuff done. It's super powerful. Obviously, you can also get a coach. So coaches can play this role too. But there's no reason why you guys couldn't form a little accountability group. I'm part of some Slack channels where they do this each morning. Everyone just posts in Slack their daily stand-up, which is just what I did yesterday, what I'm doing today, my call for help. That can be really powerful too. Are any of you part of an accountability group, or you've got an accountability buddy or someone who just rides your ass to make sure you get it done? Yep.
Yeah.
Cool.
I tried and I failed. That's not good.
What happened? How did it fail?
The last time I had an accountability buddy was with somebody who's in the UK, and we were trying to. What happened was that the balance went out.
Right.
So it ended up focusing like mostly on the other person, surprisingly not me. This happened where it just went like this, and so yeah.
Yeah.
I can't. Having said that, I will try it again though. But I think that it's significant, not rules, but yeah, I just found it really difficult to balance that. But yeah, maybe it's because they were far away. We're trying to do it on Zoom or all sorts of things. So yeah.
Yeah, and look, you can outgrow them too, but you're right, that balance is important. And there's nothing worse than being part of an accountability group where no one's listening to each other. They're just there to say what they're doing and then they tune out.
Yeah.
So what you said there, rules, I do believe there should be some structure to it, and where everyone has a certain amount of time to give their update. I've seen them turn into social groups, waffle fest, where it's really, no, this is our stand-up. It's called a stand-up because everyone should be standing up, so it's uncomfortable if it goes for too long. Everyone gets their 2 minutes. What did you do? What are you doing? What's your call for help? And keep momentum. The conversation that happens should really be about calling out each other's BS and helping each other. That bit could go for longer. But yeah, I do believe in having some structure to it. I think that's a good point, is maybe defining some rules for them. And a post-action report. So this comes from David Goggins, who's a crazy ex-Navy SEAL, pushes himself really hard. He wrote a book called Can't Hurt Me. But one of his techniques after doing anything in his life, this comes from the military, is to do a post-action report. And this is about reflecting on what did I do well, what did I do not so well, and what would I do differently next time. And you, like I said, I actually do this after everything. So I'll do a post-action report on myself after this workshop, for example. I often do these with my co-founder, like Will. She right now is delivering a separate event for Ipswich Grammar, and I'm sure afterwards we'll both download to each other and do our post-action reports. But also you can do this as a monthly retrospective. So as well as your Eisenhower Matrix, at the end of the month, look at your calendar, look at how you spent your time. What did you do well? What did you do poorly? What will you do differently next time? It's just a great little technique, and you should actually document these. So in Asana, my co-founder and I, we have one of our boards is like lessons, and in there we put all the things that we learned or we do differently. We just keep tracking it so that it's actually documented. It also records why. Like, why did we change that? Why that? It has that log. But really simple technique as a way to make sure you're spending your time on the right things. And celebrating. So this is one of my last ones, and then we'll just go free chat. But it's really important to celebrate our wins, because I think all of us as entrepreneurs are naturally, we're looking forward. Like, we're always looking where we're going. We very rarely look backwards. And because of that, we're always looking at the gap, the gap between what we want and where we are. And that gap can seem so frigging far away, and it can become like a psychological trauma for us. So looking backwards and reflecting on how far we've come, what we've achieved, it creates a motivation. It creates a positive psychology. It also makes us realize that we've faced these things before and we can overcome what's coming. So it's a great reminder that, to build some resilience. But celebrating with others too. So don't just celebrate your own wins, but part of that practice of gratitude and all the benefits of practicing gratitude, you can also achieve through celebrating other people's wins. And even if they're just small steps, don't wait until you get to, finishing the grant to celebrate. If you've just completed a major chunk of the financial reports needed, just take a little moment to celebrate that. That's an achievement of itself. It doesn't mean you go and get drunk and get tanked. It just means celebrate that little moment. That's it. So that was all the content I had. More than happy though to screen swap. More than happy just to basically talk about other things, like go through any of that in more detail, or actually take a bit of time to put it into actionable items. so that we make sure we get it all done. But first of all, how are we feeling? Is that useful?
Yeah, I've got 4 pages of to-do list now.
Will it make the boat go faster?
Yeah.
Will it make the boat go faster?
This is mine now. This is mine. So
I don't know when to start.
Have I just filled up your week with things to do that aren't your business?
Yeah.
Yeah, look, there is an overhead in setting this stuff up and making it a habit and making it something that it just becomes automated. So there is a lot of setup and overhead in getting time management right, but if you get that investment right, it'll pay dividends.
I feel like I do a lot of these things, like the things you're talking about. I feel like I do them. I just get days and, like you said, sometimes weeks where you feel like you get nothing done, but you just got to discard those weeks and move on and prepare for the next week. I think that's my biggest thing. Don't dwell on the crap week, that unproductive week. If you get to Sunday, you start again and you move on. That's how I try to roll. But sometimes I feel like I've got a couple of hours and I end up just doing something I'm not meant to be doing. I just got to focus on what I'm doing.
Yeah.
What suggestions do you have for maintaining the longevity of these? Like quite often I'll read a book or I'll go to a seminar or I'll have something like this where I get all psyched and motivated to try this new tool or new exercise or new something. And then I'm motivated for a few days, but then it kind of drops off. Then it becomes another chore or another thing I've got to do. How do you get through those kind of little slumps and keep it going?
Yeah, so for me, I bring everything back to a habit. So, science says it takes 21 days for a habit to feel sort of comfortable, 66 for a habit to set, and 6 months for a habit to become the point where you'll go back to it even after a break. So for me, it's like, how do I engineer this into a habit? And I much prefer to do something every day to make it that rather than once a week or when I feel like it. And an example of that is intermittent fasting. So I gave intermittent fasting a go where it was 2 and 5. Like you do intermittent fasting for 2 days and 5 not, or vice versa, depending on how you do it. But I found the back and forth I struggled with because I had to put in all this energy to get back into that mode and come out of it. Whereas when I decided to make it just every day, it just became my normal. It's habitual. So I think habits are powerful. I think as well, sometimes it's about what else we do with it. So for example, running, people might not like running, but if you add an audiobook or if you add music or you add something else to that moment, then it becomes more than just the act of running. And the running almost becomes invisible, like it sort of happens without you thinking about it. So yeah, how could you layer something else into the activity? Another way is how can you involve others? So sometimes, we all go through this same thing, like the motivation diminishes, but involving others, like if you're committed to, so for example, a guy I know, he was struggling with exercise, but now he's committed to this triathlon training group and he just goes, he knows they're there at 5 a.m. in the car park waiting for him. So it's like, I don't have a choice, man. I've got to get up. Like I'm going. So accountability to others is really powerful.
Yeah.
I did have another one. I just came to mind. I've forgotten it. Accountability, habit. Oh, I've forgotten it. It'll come back though in a second.
You're right.
But the thing about motivation, so we actually have motivation around the wrong way. So we believe we get motivated and then we go and do the activity. But the science actually shows that by doing the activity, that's how we become motivated. So if we want to have the energy to do the thing, we just do the thing. And like I know when I'm exercising, like properly, my diet is much more aligned because I feel great, and because I feel great, I want what's going into my body to also make me feel great. But when that comes unstuck, actually Trish mentioned this before, if I skip that, then suddenly it has this domino effect because, I missed that anyway, so what's the point? Like now this. So I think looking at your domino triggers, like what triggers your reactions, and then if you know your triggers, how can you engineer them both ways? Mm-hmm. So like exercise, like for me, That's what the other thing was I was going to say. I remember it now. How do you remove friction from the things that you want to do and add friction to the things you don't want to do? So there was a guy who, I got this from a guy who was talking about, his dentist said he had to floss, and he'd always forget to floss. So what he did every night, he'd shower, get in his pajamas, whatever, for bed, he'd pull out the dental floss for the next morning, actually break it off and put it on his bathroom bench. And what it did was remove all the friction. So the next morning when he walked in his bathroom, it's literally right there. He's got no excuse not to floss his teeth. But it's the same with, like, for me, I get all my gym gear ready the night before. It's there. All I have to do is get my left pinky toe to move out of bed, and then my left foot goes, my right foot goes, and before I know it, I'm in my gym shoes, I'm out the door. So I think, like, how do you remove friction so that you are less likely to come off the wagon? And whatever gets you triggered to fall off the wagon, how do you add tons of friction there to make it really hard? Mm-hmm. And they could be small things like the dental floss. They don't have to be big things.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an interesting one. I definitely think, though, accountability to others is huge. Like, a big motivator for me is how I show up for my kids. And particularly now post-divorce, I have 50-50 with my kids. And it means that those moments are more powerful. And it also means, like, I want to show up as the best version of me. And that's why, like, I want my kids to know that I look after my health, for example. So on the days because there's days where you just don't want to get out of bed, or there's a thunderstorm, whatever, it's just that little reminder of maybe not making it about me, maybe making it about my kids, because then I'm far more, like, I'll do anything for my kids, right?
Yeah.
So it flips that, where I don't need the motivation for self, because I've got this other motivation that's burning in my soul, which is being the best dad for my kids. So let me use that. So yeah, I think it's finding what resonates for you, and knowing that it does change over time. I mean, to your point, it does change over time. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
No worries.
We've got one, because I've got 2 kids on the spectrum, right? And so for them, if I give them lots of little tasks, they get overwhelmed. So I've now taught them what we call an autopilot thing. So it's morning routine. So they know when they get up, they don't even have to think about it. They can be asleep and still make their bed, put their uniform on, make sure, you know what I mean? And so it's what we call the morning routine, and it's autopilot for them. And even I've started doing it, my autopilot, even if I am exhausted and my body and my brain can't do, I will set the dishwasher, put the load of clothes on. Like, and you can, like, it's those autopilot things that you do in your sleep.
Because you know they're going to help you with it.
Yeah, but for them, and so they have a night routine and a morning routine. That's the only 2 things. If I say night routine, they know the 6 steps. In their brain, they don't see it as 6 steps, they just see it as 1 step. And that's what they do. And that has been really big for us as well.
Yeah.
You know, morning routine, night routine, and they just like that. It's great.
It's
organised.
We have a list, so they don't have to remember.
Yeah.
Pictures of a cereal bowl, pictures of school clothes.
Yeah.
But yep, they go through the list and then they can.
That one chunking of it's just one. It's actually in their brain. They go, that's one activity.
Yeah.
It's massive. So autopilot.
Yeah, it's so true. This comes up actually a lot in our peak persona community, because we all take these moments for self. You know, we talk about engineering our morning routines. We've got this headspace, and our poor kids wake up and it's like, eat your breakfast, do this, and it's like they just bombard us. Like, where do they get their little moment to have some headspace? So I'm very similar to you. I created a like a checklist, like a chart of all the morning routine things they had to do, and they just fold it over when they've done it. Like, they each had their own. They fold over their task when it's done, and when the whole list is done, they get rewards that go up on a chart, and that reward gets converted for cash so they can buy stuff. But anyway, what happened, they would just work through it. I wouldn't have to say anything. They just work through, done. And over time, they didn't even use the chart. They just knew that was their habit. And now, yes, they do it. It's a beautiful little moment in their life where, I think it's their age, they still mostly listen to me and kind of respect me. I'm sure that'll change soon. But so they just work through it on their own. And it's like, this is amazing. You've developed this habit. And now they start, like the other day, my son made my bed. I was like, who are you? How's this happening? But you're right. It's so powerful to engineer that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good to teach them young. I agree. to be organised in life, and it's something you need to be taught from a young age.
Yeah, but I think for me, well, for my partner, like it took that stress of us away in the morning, so it meant that I could actually focus on my time without having to micromanage everybody else. So yeah, do that. But why don't we do the same thing for us? Like, you know, like you get a little bit of chocolate when you finish the bit of routine.
Yeah, glass of wine at 7 in the morning.
There's no whiskey, you know.
Yeah.
Reward charts for ourselves.
You know, I think there's a lot in that. I actually think there's a lot in it. I mean, we do get people to define, so when they go through these moments of doing a bit of a stock take of their time use, to actually write down what is their morning routine, what is their end of day routine, convert it into a checklist. So there's an app called Streaks that you can use, or you can just print something, stick it on your fridge. But there's a lot of power in that, in making it a habit, just that habitual ticked it off, see your progress. Because it's very easy to say we do these things, but until we track it and realize, well, actually I only do it like 3 out of 7 days, and then when it's not consistent, it won't become a habit. So yeah, I think there's something in it, actually doing it that way.
That's yours.
I just recently changed a very big habit in my life. I gave up drinking alcohol 4 months ago because one of the...
Are you okay?
I am. I wasn't for a while, but I'm okay. One of the first things you said in here was busy is bullshit. And I watched a seminar a little while ago, and she really touched on, it's like the new cool to be busy. How are you? I'm really busy. Oh yeah, I'm so busy. Oh, I'm extra busy. Like everyone's aiming to be busy.
Yeah.
I myself just saying, I'm too busy to do this, I'm too busy to do that. But I actually found myself spending most of my week drinking. I'm so busy, I would go home and I would sit and I'd drink.
Yeah.
And not for any reason, like not sad or anything, just became a really bad habit. And I tried to slow down, and you know, it ended up coming back, and I said, well, I've got to stop. And yeah, it's a habit now. I'm fine without it, but
Yes.
it took a long time. The first month was hard, but I find I've got so much more time now, like, and so much more energy, and I'm starting to exercise like I used to. It was just like a naughty habit that snuck up on me and took over, and I had to go, wow, I need to stop. And you know, I'll drink again, but I need to go back to what I was before.
Yeah.
I got to, because I was so busy.
Yeah.
That was a big change. So,
Amazing.
yeah, it's amazing you can shift your time from one thing to another, and when you start feeling better about it, you then want to focus yourself and put yourself in a better place and do different things.
Yeah.
Whereas before I was like, I'm happy to just work and go home and drink beer and do the gardening, and that's it. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
But it's so much wasted time.
There's so much in that. I totally agree. We do this 30-day program where everyone has to give up their crutches, whatever that means for them, like coffee, alcohol, whatever. But it's amazing what you realize through that. When you give up coffee for 30 days, you realize that the coffee moment has this massive time overhead. Like you go to the cafe, you have your coffee, but you also probably get something like a croissant. Before you know it, you've had carbs, and then later in the day, your energy peaks and then drops. So it has this ripple. And same with alcohol. Like for me, I mean, alcohol's a downer. I have a glass of wine at night and that's it. I'm just zonked. I'm done. Whereas when you take that away, you buy back not just the time of the act, but all this extra time of your life where your energy level is just more consistent. You don't have these spikes. So there's a lot in it. And the busy, I think busy is something we hide behind. We wear it as a badge of pride to justify what we're doing and achieving. And there's a great quote I heard, which was, there's a difference between working hard and doing the hard work. Because you can be busy and therefore say, well, look how hard I'm working, because you're working lots of hours, whatever, but you're not actually doing the hardest thing. Like you're not actually doing the things that actually matter. And it's really easy to hide behind being busy. I think people use it. You can hide behind it from a fear of failure. You can hide behind it for a fear of success. No one questions. Like when you say you're busy, it's like no one questions, well, are you doing the right shit? And to your point, what I love what you said, like, because I've had this flip now. So when I'm catching up with people and they're all going how busy they are, I'm like, yeah, well, I'm spending half my days off with my kids and I'm fucking loving it. because wouldn't you? Like, isn't that the goal, is to actually not work all the time and be stressed out of your head and numb yourself with alcohol and everything else? So yeah, everything you just said really resonated for me.
So is that like when you put something on your to-do list so you can tick it off because it wasn't there before and you haven't done anything on your to-do list? So you thought, oh, at least I'll write down what I have done and tick it off.
Oh, look, I still do that sometimes. Like when I do something that wasn't on the list and then I just add it and tick it.
Oh, good.
I think it's good for the little dopamine kick. You know, it's like, it's something.
Yeah. At least I feel like I got something done.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, look, I mean, there's so much we could talk about in this same vein. I mean, going back to the Eisenhower Matrix, one of the things that it's really important we don't do are hard conversations. You know, all those conversations we avoid having out of fear, or maybe they're secrets. Maybe we have to admit something about ourselves or something we did and we avoid it, or there's this underlying issue in our relationship and we avoid it. But I think that's where, back to your point, like there is a difference between being busy, like working hard versus actually doing the hard work. I think it's a good little framing.
One of the things that I struggle with, Aaron, is the prioritization. When you have so many things that are both important and urgent.
Yep.
I find it difficult to prioritize those. Do you think it's better to do a little bit of 4 of them, or to just pick one and finish it?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I think ultimately it depends on you knowing yourself and what you need. So the example I give, actually, we're going to talk about multitasking. So the scientific studies on multitasking show that it's actually, you're less productive when you multitask. Tasks take longer because you've got context switching. So if you're working on something over here and then you have to work on something over here, the lag time in context switching causes it to be less productive use of your time. But what those studies fail to take into account is multitasking is sometimes how we actually get anything done. Because if we had to sit here all day and just do this one thing, like, I'd probably shoot myself in the head. And by getting distracted or multitasking and doing something here, even though, yes, it might take longer, it actually enables me to do it, because it goes from being a less painful task to now keeping me not getting bored, keeping me energized and all that. So I actually think multitasking can be really powerful if it works for you and if it's the right thing. So to answer your question, like the assessment is, what's the best use of my time right now? What's going to have the biggest impact? If there's 2 things that are both equal, both number 1 priority, if it's the sort of work that you need to be in a flow state or you can achieve in one block, then I definitely think see it through to completion. Like, see it through to completion is really powerful. It's a good psychological endorphin rush when you get it done. You don't crap on yourself because you get to the end of the day and you've got half done tasks. So I think that makes sense. But if it's a sort of task where you're just going to get bored, you're not interested, then leveraging multitasking to keep you interested, I think is really important. Really effective. So I think it comes down to what you're doing and knowing what you need, whether you do both or just one.
Okay.
One thing that stuck with me, it was actually my mum said this to me, is so when I was a teenager, I'd start lots of things, and I think this is like shiny object syndrome for entrepreneurs. We start lots of things because the starting's really easy, and it's when you get all the dopamine hits and all that sort of thing, and then when it gets hard, you lose that chemical reaction, so you stop doing stuff. But you have to see things through to completion, and that was my mum's advice to me. She saw me starting all this stuff. She's like, "Are you actually going to finish something?" And I was like, "Fuck, I don't finish things."
Your mum sounds like my mum. Yeah.
But that was a complete just unlock for me. So now I have this little mantra, to completion. It's one of my mantras on my wall, which is to completion. When you decide to do something, you do it to completion. And it ties in with the research of Angela Duckworth around resilience and grit. So the number 1 indicator of success in whatever you ever want to do in life, if you just measured one characteristic of a human to determine whether they be successful, it's grit. And grit is often misunderstood. When we talk about resilience, we think it's like you keep pushing through pain. It's actually not about that. It's actually about seeing things through to completion. So will you see something through to completion regardless of the situation or circumstance? It doesn't mean you just constantly push through pain, because you need active recovery, you need repair, you need everything else. But yeah, to completion, I think, is a great mantra to remember.
Yeah.
I think the other thing too with that is like, what will you regret if you don't get it done? Like, is there something out of those two that if you don't do it, like somebody will die effectively to that extent, you know, like which one of those two will effectively make somebody live or die? Like that's the one that's, you know, and that determines whether or not you do it. But that thing with my thing is I am a career procrastinator. Okay. It is my number one supersonic skill. But with that, one of the things that I did as a teenager was that I was supposed to study for my teacher's examination as a piano player. I could have done this thing at 15, 16. I was supposed to go to the conservatorium, right? And I procrastinated, didn't do it. A couple of years later, started to do I learned all my exam pieces to concert standard, did not take the exam. Stopped, did it again, did it again, did it again. And now 20 years later, what's happened is that I've started to do that thing again, and my right arm has stopped and I can no longer use it, which means that I can no longer physically take that exam. So I've procrastinated so long in my life with something that I can no longer actually physically do it. And that has been a huge turnaround in my mental capacity to go, actually, you have to do this because one day you might not be able to do it. Yeah. So that's like big emotional for me. So I'm like, okay, I cannot be a procrastinator anymore. Like I have my two tasks. Which one is going to make somebody die? Which one's going to make somebody live? Do that task, and then, you know, because you can't keep putting it off. So that's been the one for me this year.
I like that. Yeah. You reminded me of you have to take the opportunity of a lifetime in the lifetime of the opportunity.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's really powerful.
Mm. Like when you said, you know, is someone going to die? We sort of say that in our office when we're all still working at 9 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. You just have to say to yourself, they're going to be there next week.
Yeah.
The job will be there on Monday. Yeah. You know, they're going to have to wait. Like even if you got it to them at 10 o'clock tonight, you're probably still not going to do anything with it still. You know, Monday afternoon. So stop wasting. Go and enjoy your weekend and come back early on Monday and get it done.
Unless you're like me and work with elderly people where one did die. But that's a different that's a different hardcore. That was a fun day.
Aaron, was that Asana app you're talking about, the one with the 3 dots?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. So there's a free version, there's a paid version, but it's very common in teams to use, like software teams and that sort of thing. An alternative to Asana is Trello. Trello is another one.
Yeah.
And Monday's slightly different, but Monday's also a workflow management tool as well.
Okay.
Jenny, the other thing you made me think of then with those competing priorities is also looking at like some tasks when we get them done, that's the end of our time commitment. Mm-hmm. Other tasks, when we get it done, it triggers all sorts of other work that might come up. Yeah. So I think getting the one done that has closure first and then getting the other one done that cascades into other work second might be an effective way of doing it.
Okay. I'll look at it that way too. Thank you.
Yeah.
One of the, just to share, one of the things that we do in our office is, particularly for my admin and bookings teams, most of their days are same old, and quite often not same old, but they're doing the same work each day, and they can occasionally get abused by people over the phone, because we work in a lot of the pre-employment space, so then when people don't get jobs, they take out their frustration on our bookings team, who have nothing to do with it, but they still sometimes pop it.
Yep.
But because of their workload too, they also feel that they don't get a lot of sense of accomplishment because their day is quite often never finished. You know, it's an ongoing flow. And I'm also not in the office on most days. So we actually have a routine at the end of our day where we do a daily news email where they'll just a quick flick of anything significant of the day. But then each person shares one thing they're proud of and one thing that they're thankful for.
Wow, that's awesome.
And it really, the purpose of it was I wanted them to get into the mindset, particularly before they got in a car, from a safety perspective, before they got in a car and drove. I didn't want them ruminating on the negative, you know, or being worked up about something. I wanted them to change their mindset. But it also was just more from a mental health perspective to either give themselves a pat on the back, or give someone else a pat on the back, or have some gratitude for a positive event that day. And I find it interesting where sometimes they'll talk about themselves, sometimes they might talk about their co-workers, sometimes they might talk about their family. It's just interesting what they share, and it just gives me really good insight into, I guess, the feel for the office when I'm not there. But, and then at night I'll actually respond to it as well with my own proud of and thankful for. And it's just really been a good dynamic for our team. We've had the same team now for over 3 years, and I think that's part of what kind of binds us all together as well, even though we're not always physically together.
That's awesome, Jenny. That's really awesome that you do that. I think it's fantastic you create that moment and that space for that to happen. Because, I often think workers, with coronavirus, right? So workers in hazardous environments, like if you're working in a hospital, coronavirus infected area, you leave the hospital, you get decontaminated, right, before you go home. But yet we all work with some sort of psychological impact or trauma. We don't have that. Where's our sanitization process before we get home? So the fact you've engineered that in, that's awesome. I really love that. Yeah,
it's worked really well. And, it took a little while, and there's certainly some days, it's like when you do gratitude at the end of the day. I know when I went through a period of quite severe depression, I went through a gratitude, at the end of each day, I would make sure I listed off 3 things that I was grateful for. And some days, it was something like, I'm grateful for I have a soft pillow, and sometimes you had to really struggle to find something. And I also can see that in the team. So at the start, some people would really find it difficult to find something. And I find myself particularly, if I'm replying, late at night, it's just a really good way to make me stop and refresh, as well. And it can be a challenge, but it makes you do that challenge, and it really makes you change that mindset.
Yeah, exactly.
So if anyone has those kind of days where you feel like, I've got nothing done, or you're kind of reflecting all things that maybe you messed up, it's just nice to have a reset at the end of the day to find a couple of those things, and makes you feel less alone by being grateful for other things as well.
I'm glad we're talking about this because we're talking about time management and being more productive. But if you get these things right, like these practices, like giving yourself permission to take time to have these moments, like even paying your staff's time while they're having these conversations, makes us all more productive and better humans and better able to do our jobs. And I love that you are prioritizing that stuff. That's great.
Thanks.
Cool. So we're pretty much out of time, and I don't want to waste anyone's time. Anything else you guys want to talk about before we go? Any questions, any thoughts, last minute reflections?
All good?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
No worries. Like, I'm in Slack, so if you do have if anything comes up after this, just hit me up. I'm always reachable. I think I've got the mentoring booking slot for next week again, so feel free to drop stuff in there too. And feel free to suggest other topics for these. And if you'd rather a different format, if you'd rather do it more like a mastermind group like Sharon does, or content piece, whatever you need, I want to make sure that it's valuable. So let me know. And if something's outside of my domain, I'm more than happy to tap someone who we can get in as well. So just let me know.
So Aaron, are these on every Thursday, every Tuesday, are they?
Not every Tuesday. So mine are, I think, monthly, these ones. Yes. The next one's on, hang on, let me get this right. When's the next one?
I must have missed it. There must be a schedule somewhere that I've missed. Is there?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's been published or not, but the next one is on September 8th. So it should always be
4 weeks, I think.
Yeah, it's about exactly every 4 weeks. So next one's on morning of September. So the same time, always on a Tuesday. Next one's on September 8th. There is a sheet. So what I'll do, I've got a Google sheet here. I'll just drop the dates and times into the Slack channel so everyone's got them.
Good. Then, I can block it out of my diary then.
Yep.
So Aaron, there are a couple of books that you mentioned in there. I was sort of taking some notes of some of them, like The Why We Sleep, but there was a couple of other people that you mentioned that I didn't write down.
So I've written some notes here as I was talking. just to make sure I captured it all too. So I'll drop all the links to that probably in the next sort of 20 minutes after this in Slack, so that you've got all them as well. Yeah, and I promised some templates as well, so I'll drop them, and a couple of websites I referenced that I caught. But if there's anything I missed, like just, hit me up. I'll find it.
Great.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. Have an amazing day. Enjoy your week.
Enjoy your day.
Thanks, everyone. It was a great session, Aaron. Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.